My articles focus on ruhaniyat, spirituality, jinns, kodam, black magic, the evil eye, and ways to protect oneself from negative spiritual influences, inshallah, as well as topics related to spiritual and occult practices. However, this certainly does not mean that my curiosity and interests are limited to these areas alone. My mind often wanders into many other unusual and intriguing subjects. Telekinesis is something that has always sparked my curiosity. The ability to move, influence, or manipulate a physical object with the mind without any physical contact is most certainly an amazing psychic ability. But the questions remain: does telekinesis truly exist? Many people claim to possess such abilities. They record themselves waving their hands in front of a piece of foil, and when it moves, they clap and smile as though they have mastered telekinesis. However, in my opinion, there is a significant difference between movement caused by air currents from your hand and an object moving simply by the power of the mind. For information to be truly legitimate, in my view, it must be something that you have personally witnessed, something experienced by someone very close to you, or something you have experienced yourself. Over time, I have heard accounts stating that certain government officials have sought out individuals believed to possess psychic abilities. In the following discussion, I will refer to these scenarios without revealing who experienced what, inshallah. Around 10 to 15 years ago, here in the United States, an individual who we will call Ahmad was contacted by one of his friends who explained to him that a woman he knew was experiencing something unusual with her child. Assuming it was something demonic, she sought the assistance of a spiritual healer like Ahmad because, quite frankly, she was scared to be alone with her own child. Ahmad had spent much of his life immersed in the world of the occult and was highly knowledgeable in its practices and traditions. Yet throughout his years of study and experience, he had never encountered any credible mention of telekinesis or similar abilities. As a result, he had always assumed that if something seemingly paranormal were to occur, it would either be a figment of the mind or the result of a spiritual influence. The woman, whom we will call Margaret, contacted one of Ahmad's friends regarding a troubling situation involving her son, whom we will call Johnny. She was given Ahmad's phone number, and the two eventually spoke. Margaret explained that her son had been seriously injured and had fallen into a coma. The doctors had told her that he might remain in that state indefinitely. Yet unexpectedly, he regained consciousness after 2 weeks. After bringing him home from the hospital, Margaret began noticing a great deal of unusual, seemingly paranormal activity in the house. The disturbances became so unsettling that she grew afraid to be alone with her son. Believing that some kind of negative or demonic presence had followed her son home from the hospital, she hoped that Ahmad would come to her home and remove whatever entity might be responsible. Ahmad reassured Margaret and told her not to worry. They agreed on a time and date for him to come and see her son, Johnny. Just a few days after Margaret's call, Ahmad drove to her home. She welcomed him inside, and they both sat down to talk. Johnny was in the same room, playing a video game on his console with his back turned toward them, so Ahmad could not see his face. Ahmad then asked Margaret to explain exactly what had happened to her son. Margaret told him that Johnny had gone to watch a baseball game and had been sitting at the top of the bleachers. While playfully horsing around with a friend, he lost his balance and fell all the way down the bleachers, suffering a severe head injury. By the time Johnny was rushed to the hospital, he had already fallen into a coma. A few days later, the doctors informed Margaret that the brain injury her son had sustained was extremely serious and that he would most likely remain in a coma. Margaret visited her son every day hoping for a miracle, and a miracle is exactly what she received. After 2 weeks in the hospital, Johnny finally awoke. Although he had some difficulty moving, he otherwise seemed fine. His mother decided to bring him home so she could care for him there, which she did. Not long after returning home, however, Margaret began noticing strange occurrences when she was with her son. Objects would move, the lights would turn on and off, and the television channels would change on their own. Neither she nor her son could explain these events, and Margaret became convinced that something demonic had attached itself to Johnny. This belief, ultimately led her to seek the help of a spiritual healer. Ahmad was convinced that if what Margaret was saying were true, then her son might be possessed by something demonic. Yet the boy appeared quite normal as he sat playing his video game. Ahmad called out to Johnny and the boy turned around. His mother told him that Ahmad was a friend of hers and that he wanted to see his special powers. Johnny then did exactly that. First, he looked at the remote control lying on the table in front of Ahmad and Margaret, and it began to move. Curious, Ahmad took a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and asked Johnny to move that as well, which he did. Johnny then turned toward the television and, simply by looking at it, began changing the channels, while the remote control remained untouched on the table. After demonstrating what he could do, Johnny became very tired and weak. Throughout this incident, Ahmad did not sense any spiritual presence. After conducting several other spiritual checks on Johnny, he became certain that the boy was not haunted or influenced by any entity. Instead, it was clear that Johnny had developed an ability that he could control entirely with his own mind, without the assistance of any spiritual being. Ahmad explained to Margaret that he had spent a lifetime in the occult and had come to understand how spiritual entities operate, even how they could move objects. But what her son had just demonstrated was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was not spiritual in nature. It was something entirely new and unique. Johnny's power came solely from his mind and his eyes. Margaret felt a wave of relief, and Ahmad left soon after. When Ahmad returned home, the friend who had introduced him to Margaret called to ask what had happened. Ahmad recounted the events and said that what the boy had done was unlike anything he had ever seen, except perhaps if it had been aided by a spiritual being. But Johnny had no such assistance. The power he displayed came purely from within himself. Ahmad's friend, somewhat familiar with the concept of telekinesis, advised him to steer clear of the family, just in case government officials or others became involved. Ahmad agreed. Over time, Margaret would occasionally call Ahmad to provide updates on her son. Then, without warning, she mysteriously moved up north. Concerned by the sudden disappearance, Ahmad eventually blocked her number, left with only the lingering memory of the boy's extraordinary abilities. It has long been believed by some that the human mind and body harbor hidden, mysterious powers. Yet as the world has advanced and modernity has taken hold, humanity has lost the ability to tap into them. Every so often, these dormant abilities awaken, sometimes without intention, sometimes triggered by a sudden dramatic event. Whatever sparks their return, one cannot help but wonder, if we still possess the powers that some say were lost to us, would the world be any different, or perhaps far more extraordinary than we can imagine? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.